it's great. It's also great that we managed to do this podcast recording. It's a pretty busy week with football. It's also a week where we both have a few days off. I have family visiting from Germany to see the little one. You are off up north, so yeah, makeshift, different backgrounds, but we'll make do as we always do. And also our situation is infinitely better than what Borussia Dortmund is going through right now, Stefan. So it's definitely a lot less makeshift. Let's say it that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, my trip up here has been pretty, disheveled. Not a huge amount of planning's gone into it. We've had to kind of make up as we go along. So in many ways, quite similar to Dortmund's season, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, where do we start with this? It was a game, obviously, if anyone doesn't know, we're obviously now talking about the Frankfurt 2 Dortmund 0 game, which was a Friday night match. And I think probably the biggest story in German football this weekend as we kind of continue to kind of watch the slow and somewhat, worrying demise of Nuri Sahin. It's almost like, at this point, I think most Dortmund fans would wish the club to just kind of put him out of his misery.
Yeah.
It's probably worth us kind of providing some sort of context for anyone who maybe hasn't been keeping up with German football. Decided to stick on the podcast this week. Dortmund are now 11th, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't checked, maybe 10th on the league table. They lost to Frankfurt after losing to Holstein Kiel midweek. And, I think I posted that this is their worst points tally at this point in the season since Jurgen Klopp's last season at the club, which is a season in which he resigned in April because he was kind of so ashamed, maybe not the right word, but there was definitely shame in there, but he's just exhausted. And he basically admitted that, he'd come to the end of his tether with the club and the fans, and sorry, not the fans, the club itself and the squad and stuff. So he felt it was right to move on. And, Dortmund were in a complete and utter crisis that season. And that's kind of where they are this season as well, for different reasons, but still crisis nonetheless. In terms of the performance on the pitch, I thought it was a game in which Frankfurt, in a way, almost kind of rubbed the salt in the wounds in the sense that they looked very comfortable, I thought, throughout much of the match. And Dortmund huffed and puffed. They certainly had their chances. Guirassy hit the post in the first half, or maybe it was Jamie Gittins, I can't remember which one it was. And, they had a kind of flurry of chances in the second half. Although, interestingly enough, I checked the kind of XG timeline of this match before we came on air, just to double check and see, if Dortmund had created more chances in the second half. And sure enough, Frankfurt were still ahead of them in that regard, which makes sense since they obviously scored as well at the end of the match. And it was a game that I think Frankfurt showed a huge amount of resolve and talent, because they also were dealing with their own issues in the sense that, Omar Marmoush had been omitted from the squad ahead of his impending move to Manchester City. And, instead of capitulating Manu, Hugo Ekitike steps up, scores the goal, and then, they have a number of chances with other players. I thought Knauf, the young player who obviously was deemed surplus to requirement at Dortmund before moving to Frankfurt, and has kind of slowly but surely turned himself into a star there, should have scored as well. So Frank and just kind of throughout the match, I thought Frankfurt actually looked very comfortable. They didn't always attack, they didn't always create chances, but even when Dortmund had the ball, I thought Frankfurt looked quite comfortable off it. And then sure enough, they got up the park in the dying moments of the game and scored a second goal. And then you kind of look at Dortmund and you look at the man in both of those goals. The first goal was a simple 1-2 in which Benzibaini just completely gives up chasing his man. And you see when that goal goes in and Hugo Ekitike scores it, that, Benzibaini just kind of throws his hands up in the air, or throws his hands up in the air, or just kind of falls to the ground, kind of blaming someone else for it. Even though it was a very straightforward, he had to chase his runners, as simple as that. It's the kind of basics. And then the second goal was one in which Emre Can gets dispossessed in the middle of the pitch, and equally he just kind of throws his arms up in the air. And then when you can combine that with the kind of play acting, which I found quite shameful for much of the game from Guirassy, where he's just desperately looking for a penalty at any beck and call, it just kind of, I think it just painted a picture of a team that were completely, devoid of any kind of belief, seemed entirely fed up with the situation they were in. and kind of really struggling to kind of provide answers to the problems or solutions to the problems in front of them. And I completely understand why, as the reporting has suggested since the game, that, you know, the higher-ups at Dortmund are kind of finally accepting that Nuri Sahin probably isn't the guy who's going to be able to fix this team and get them back to where Dortmund think they belong in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, which is at least the top 4, right? And by their own understanding, the top 2. I thought, you know, it's almost shameful that the Dortmund story is sucking out all the air out of this room, right? Because we have Eintracht Frankfurt here who are playing such a fantastic season. There's this beautiful moment when Omar Mamouche comes off on the pitch after the game, right? And we all know what's going on, right? We all know that he's saying goodbye to the fans and he gives hugs to every single one of those players. And Hukui Kitike steps up in this moment and shows that he is the successor. Of course, today reports that Eli Wahi is going to join from Olympique Marseille. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But, you know, this really should be all about Eintracht Frankfurt and the incredible season that they're playing. And, you know, how I think it's going to continue even without Mamouche, because it just seems like such a healthy club and a healthy squad. And Dortmund sucked the air out of the room because, you know, of all the chaos that's going on there. And we'll find a room I think we'll find a room to talk about Eintracht Frankfurt and very soon and cover it as it should be. But, you know, this Dortmund story, the negativity of it and the way it's really completely collapsing is just so tremendously big in German football. And it really, the question is, how deep can it go, right? At this stage, we've seen big clubs be there before who make bad decisions in one season, miss out on Champions League, and then it kind of spirals out of control. Hamburg come to mind, Schalke come to mind, right? It can go quicker than people think. Werder Bremen was almost there too. They're in recovery mode now. You know, the patient is in recovery mode. They're not in a coma like Schalke and Hamburg SV still are. But, you know, it can go quicker than people think, I think. And that's why I think it is so very interesting that decisive decisions that had to be made were not made at this point yet. What difference is a game in Bologna going to make if that is really his final match, right? It just prolongs the inevitable, in my opinion. And you already have where, you know, and I do think these reports are true because they come from multiple sources. And when I talk to people that follow this story closely, they tell me that this is exactly what's going on. If Matthias Sammer and Lars Ricken are of the opinion that you cannot continue working with Sebastian Kehl and Nuri Sahin, there is no point continuing this constellation. You know, like there is no point saying that the way the club is run at this moment still works. You can disagree with Nuri Sahin, with Sebastian Lars Ricken's and Matthias Sammer's opinion. But if 4 out of the 5 people that make decisions at Borussia Dortmund say we cannot continue the way it is, then it's broken beyond repair, in my opinion. You know, then you can only have really 2 solutions. You either go separate ways with Sebastian Kehl and Nuri Sahin, or you blow up the entire thing and you say all of them have to go, right, at this stage. Because if these people can't work together, which seemingly is the case, why prolong it? If you already know you can no longer work together and there is not going to be a good solution at the end of this, with this current group of people that make decisions, why prolong it beyond the Bologna game? And you know what, Stefan, the thing is too, I think there's a good chance to beat Bologna. And then what? Then what do you do, right? You go to the next Bundesliga game, you lose that, and I mean, they're 10th in the Bundesliga table now, right? They're so far beyond the top 4, which is, you know, it's 3 points now to Mainz, who are 6th. Stuttgart is a resurgent, right? So it's 7 points to them, they're 4th. Leipzig sit behind Stuttgart. Leipzig probably be the story if it wasn't for Dortmund as well, the negative story of the week. I just don't see the sense in continuing this at this very moment. It's obviously broken, and so why prolong it? You have a bunch of dead men walking one way or another.
Yeah, I think you make a perfect point, and I mean, the really bizarre. You're absolutely right. Like, what difference does it make if they do win against Bologna? It's not as if they have come up against, you know, a run of really good teams and have fallen apart here. the last team they lost to was Holstein Kiel. And it's not even as if Nuri Sahin could argue that, they don't have a decent squad or they didn't have the right team, because he more or less stuck out his strongest 11 at the weekend against Frankfurt. So can't argue that they've picked up too many injuries. Can't argue that they've had a run against the very best teams. I mean, I know they've just played Frankfurt and Leverkusen, but man for man, they should be able to match that Frankfurt side. And then, if you look at the teams they've got coming up, it's after Bologna, it's Werder Bremen, again, who are playing very well, but they're a mid-table club. Shakhtar, Heidenheim, Stuttgart, Bochum, Union St. Pauli, and Augsburg, and then RB Leipzig. So maybe they have a decent run. Maybe they have a run of games against teams in the bottom half of the table, which is where a new manager can come and make a difference. Or stick with Nuri Sahin, and he maybe fumbles through those games, picks up some points, things get back to some sort of degree of normality or respectability, and they just kind of delay the inevitable. And the worrying thing is that most Dortmund fans would probably say, yeah, Nuri Sahin hasn't done a good enough job, but he's not the main problem. He's not the issue that they're in the situation that they're in. They're in the same situation they've been in for the last 2 or 3 years. And it goes all the way back to that first goal. Benzema Yini, left back, the guy's not good enough to be a Dortmund player. We've been saying that for years and years and years. But Dortmund just seem incapable or uninterested in, putting together a squad that's capable of challenging for the top 4. And that's the thing that really bums me out, especially if I was a Dortmund fan. It's the fact that it'd be one thing if they were either sticking with Sahin or opting to change the head coach, but in the process of doing so had brought in 5 or 6 new players this month and said, right, we're well aware of the fact that the squad isn't good enough. We're also going to work very hard this month to bring in new players, fill the holes in the team, and see how we got on in the second half of the season. Yes, we lost to Leverkusen. Yes, we slip up in a banana skin to Holstein Kiel. Yes, we lost a very good Frankfurt team, but there's still something to salvage from this season. And believe we can do that with Nuri Sahin now that he's been back in the transfer window. But it's 20th of January. There's 10 days left of this January transfer window. 11, sorry. They haven't done anything. They haven't signed a single player. And the only player they seem to be actually making any headway with is Marcus Rashford.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What the hell is Marcus Rashford going to do in this team? The only thing he's going to do, as I said on Blue Sky this afternoon, is walk into this team and demand to play in Jamie Gittin's spot. Jamie Gittin's been probably one of the few players that actually performed for Dortmund this year. And it beggars belief. I really do have a lot of sympathy for Dortmund fans at this moment in time, because it's as if the club are so disconnected from reality and what's happening on the pitch that they just seem incapable of worrying about this. And I had a really kind of quite negative and pessimistic thought about this. And I actually thought to myself the other day, I was like, I wonder if that board are simply thinking, well, do you know what? Jamie Gittins will probably leave for about 60 or 70 million euros in the summer. So we've done all we have to do this season. That's all that matters. And they just simply don't care about anything else that's happening because their behaviour in this January transfer window would certainly suggest that. I know there's still 11 days to go. I know they've been linked with a number of players, especially from the Premier League, but the vast majority of them are players on loan. And as we said all last week, and we made the point last week as well, they did this last January. They loaned a bunch of players last January, and everyone got hoodwinked by Jadon Sancho coming, and oh my God, the return of Jadon Sancho, isn't that exciting? It's like the old days, and he's going to help them in the Champions League, and wow, look at that, Dortmund got to the Champions League final. But when the dust settled in the summer, they were still in the exact same position they were in 6 months ago. And I just feel like nothing's going to change here. I feel like they're either going to stick with Nuri Sahin or they're going to sack him. I don't even think it matters at this point, because no one at Dortmund has any interest in actually rebuilding the squad this month. So nothing's going to change.
So, as you were talking about Jamie Gittins here and your theory about, we're going to get 60, 70 million euros for him, maybe from Bayern Munich, we're going to talk about in a moment. You're not wrong. I've been told that Borussia Dortmund are not too worried about missing out on the Champions League next season because of the Club World Cup. And the hope that will generate, originally FIFA told the clubs that participate that it will be 50 million euros, right, to just participate. Now that number has dropped to 30. I suspect it will drop even further once it becomes 20 or 10 million euros. I wonder if European clubs even want to show up. But right now, I've been told if FIFA can give them 30 to 50 million euros for the Club World Cup, Dortmund are not too worried about missing on the Champions League, which is which is a ridiculous thing to think about, right? I mean, and I also understand not everyone at the club thinks like that. I think that Lars Ricken and Matthias Sammer very much disagree with this, but there is certain elements of the club that think that. And I heard this and I said, this is ridiculous. This is just the craziest thing you can imagine. You banking on a tournament that right now we don't know if the money is there. I understand that Saudi now has bought a big chunk of the zone, so the money might be there, right? But your purpose cannot be like, oh yeah, well, we miss out in the Champions League, so whatever, we're playing the Club World Cup, so that will fix it. Hey,
but you know,
it's like that one year where Dortmund missed the Champions League and Watzke wasn't bothered because he took out an insurance the year before that like covered the. I mean, this is peak Arsenal. This is peak Arsenal under Arsene Wenger, right?
Yeah.
Where the club was just like, oh yeah, as long as we're good enough, who cares? And we have these eventualities covered.
Do you not think that just sums up Dortmund though? They don't actually.
Yeah,
this is the problem we've had under Vaska for time and time. They don't actually care about the results on the pitch. They only care about the results on the financial report at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And to them, the Champions League isn't this kind of peak of sporting integrity. To them, it's just another 30 or 40 million euros in the bank account. And if they can get that elsewhere, then, who cares? And I don't know. And it perfectly sums the club up. And it's exactly why they have never tried or even dreamed of being the kind of genuine rivals to Bayern that everyone kind of wants them to be. Because as far as, Vaska is concerned, finishing fourth and finishing first in the Bundesliga is probably just an extra, 10, 50 million euros. It's not a huge amount of money. What else is there to fight for? You couldn't really care about the allure of actually winning a league title or anything like that. So why bother? And that just seeps through the club, I think.
And that is the difference between Borussia Dortmund and this club right there, Bayern Munich. Because, we criticize them on this pod a lot, but there is one thing that I think everyone in this world can admire about Bayern Munich. They put winning above everything else. And the finances sort itself out afterwards, right? Because if you win a lot, you make a lot of money. But that is the number one thing for Bayern Munich. Everyone who works at that club, the number one thing is to win. And if you won 10 Bundesliga titles in a row, your next goal is to make it 11, and then make it 12, and then make it 13, right? And that is just a huge difference. And then they worry about the budgets and the numbers. They're almost secondary, but they sort themselves out, because if you're hugely successful, guess what? You make a lot of money, which you do, right? And I think that is in a nutshell the cultural difference between them and Borussia Dortmund. And, I think it's somewhere in between there. They have to kind of figure out what they want to be as a football club, or if they even want to be a football club, or if they want to be a stock company, right? Yeah. I mean, they're a listed stock company. I hear from Borussia Dortmund fans, our stadium is so great. This is for real fans. It's not like the Allianz Arena where it's like, this is real football. We're not like an investor club like Leipzig. It's like, yeah, but then stop acting like a stock company. Actually play well on the field. And, I know most of fans think that way, but maybe as a club, you should also act that way. And I think there's a huge disconnect there at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. But I also feel like we could probably spend the next 4 hours talking about Dortmund. And I fear Dortmund fans are probably sick. I think we spent the last 3 episodes back to back complaining about the problems of Dortmund.
They're the biggest story. What can we do?
No, I know exactly, and you're absolutely spot on. And that's the issue. There's so much more than just Nuri Sahin as a head coach that's at fault here. And unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to get resolved this month, regardless of who they sign on loan from Chelsea or Man United, or who's the head coach for the rest of the season. I think there's just so much more to it. And I was thinking today, it actually reminds me a wee bit of like Manchester United in a sense, in the way that you had a club that were raised to a certain level with, their most successful head coach in history. And since he's left, they've just kind of dissolved or just kind of fallen into this malaise, because there's no one at the club who's capable of matching what he did and what he brought to the club. And we'll just have to see what happens. But it's an evolving story. By the time this comes out, maybe Nuri Sahin will be so sacked. We think it'll probably happen after the Bologna game if he loses that. But in terms of that performance against Frankfurt, it didn't really offer much hope.